Imagine walking into a French restaurant today. The waiter places a plate in front of you. Golden French fries, creamy potato gratin, perfectly roasted potatoes. It's difficult to imagine French cuisine without them. But 250 years ago, many people in France refused to eat potatoes. Some believed they caused leprosy. Others thought they were poisonous. Many considered them food fit only for animals. In some places, growing potatoes was actively discouraged. Yet, within just a few decades, this same vegetable helped save France from hunger, won the support of a king and queen, and became one of the country's most important crops. How did one of the world's most hated vegetables become one of France's greatest foods? The answer isn't just about farming. It's a story of war, science, psychology, and perhaps the greatest marketing campaign in food history. This is how potatoes saved France. Long before potatoes became comfort food, they were strangers in Europe. Nobody knew whether they were safe. Nobody knew whether they could feed a nation. One man believed they could. Almost everyone else believed he was wrong. Changing that belief would change the future of France forever. Our story begins thousands of kilometers away, in the Andes Mountains of South America. For more than 8,000 years, indigenous civilizations carefully cultivated potatoes. High above sea level, where harsh weather made farming difficult, the potato became the foundation of survival. It produced abundant harvests. It tolerated cold temperatures, and unlike many crops, it could grow in poor soil. When Spanish explorers reached the Americas in the 16th century, they carried the potato back to Europe. At first, most Europeans didn't know what to make of it. It looked strange. It grew underground. Its flowers resembled those of poisonous plants from the nightshade family. People naturally became suspicious. France was among the most skeptical countries. Many doctors warned against eating potatoes. Some claimed they caused disease. Others associated them with leprosy, despite there being no scientific evidence to support the belief. Rumors spread from village to village. Parents warned their children about them. Farmers refused to grow them. If potatoes appeared at all, they were often fed to pigs or livestock, never placed on the family dinner table. At the time, bread was the heart of French life. Rich or poor, almost everyone depended on wheat. But this dependence came with a hidden danger. If bad weather destroyed the wheat harvest, there was no backup. Food prices exploded. Families went hungry. Entire communities suffered. Again and again, France faced food shortages. Yet beneath their feet, the solution had already arrived. The potato could produce far more food from the same piece of land than wheat. It survived harsher conditions and required fewer resources. But facts didn't matter. Fear did. The French weren't rejecting potatoes because they understood them. They were rejecting them because they didn't. Then, history intervened in the most unexpected way. Not in a royal palace, not in a university, but inside a prison camp, where one man would discover a truth that could change an entire nation. The year was 1756. Europe was engulfed in one of the largest conflicts in history, the 7 Years' War. Battles stretched across Europe, North America, Africa, India, and the Caribbean. Some historians even call it the first true World War. Among the thousands of French soldiers marching into battle was a young military pharmacist. His name was Antoine-Augustin Parmentier. Unlike soldiers carrying muskets, Parmentier carried medicine. His job was to treat the wounded, prepare medicines, and keep the army alive. But during the fighting, everything changed. He was captured by Prussian forces. As a prisoner of war, he expected the worst: poor shelter, little food, disease, perhaps even starvation. Instead, the Prussian army served prisoners something almost every single day: potatoes, breakfast, potatoes, lunch, potatoes, dinner, potatoes again. Back home in France, this would have sounded like a death sentence. After all, the French believed potatoes were dangerous. Many considered them unhealthy. Some believed they spread disease. Parmentier expected to become sick, but the opposite happened. Days turned into weeks. Weeks became months. He remained healthy, strong enough to survive imprisonment. The food that France feared was keeping him alive. Every meal challenged everything he had been taught. He watched fellow prisoners survive on potatoes. He observed Prussian farmers growing them successfully. He noticed something remarkable. Nobody feared them. Nobody questioned whether they were poisonous. For the Prussians, the potato wasn't strange. It was simply food, and very good food. For the first time, Parmentier realized the problem wasn't the potato. The problem was ignorance. France had rejected one of the most productive crops in Europe without understanding it. That realization changed the course of his life. When the war finally ended, Parmentier returned home. But he didn't return with treasure. He returned with an idea that almost everyone would laugh at. He wanted France to eat potatoes. Convincing a few friends would have been difficult. Convincing an entire country seemed impossible. Parmentier quickly discovered that facts alone couldn't defeat centuries of fear. Whenever he spoke about potatoes, people dismissed him. Those are animal food. They cause disease. They don't belong on our tables. Old beliefs proved stronger than new evidence. But Parmentier refused to give up. As a pharmacist, he trusted science more than rumors. He began conducting careful experiments. He studied the nutritional value of potatoes, compared them with wheat, measured how much food they produced. Again and again, the results surprised him. Potatoes yielded far more food from the same amount of land. They required fewer resources. They survived colder weather, and they contained valuable nutrients that many poor families desperately needed. To Parmentier, the conclusion was obvious. If France embraced potatoes, fewer people would go hungry. He published books, wrote scientific papers, presented his research to agricultural societies. He entered competitions, delivered lectures. Slowly, a small number of educated people began listening. But ordinary farmers remained skeptical. Scientific reports weren't enough to change generations of tradition. Then, something unexpected happened. His work reached the royal court. And there, he found two of the most powerful allies in France, King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette. They believed Parmentier's ideas deserved a chance, but convincing millions of ordinary people would require far more than royal approval. It would require one of the cleverest psychological experiments in history. By the 1770s, Antoine-Augustin Parmentier had something few scientists ever achieved. He had attracted the attention of the King of France. King Louis XVI understood the danger facing his kingdom. France depended almost entirely on wheat. When wheat harvests failed, bread became scarce. Prices soared. The poor suffered first, but eventually everyone felt the consequences. The king knew that feeding his people wasn't simply an agricultural problem, it was a political one. A hungry nation could become an angry nation. Parmentier believed potatoes offered a solution. They produced more food than wheat, required less fertile land, and survived conditions that often destroyed grain crops. The king listened carefully. Unlike many others, he wasn't interested in old superstitions. He wanted results. According to historical accounts, King Louis XVI began wearing potato blossoms in the buttonhole of his royal coat. It was a simple gesture, but an incredibly powerful one. The flower came from a plant most French people still distrusted. If the king proudly wore it, perhaps it wasn't so dangerous after all. Then, another influential figure joined the campaign, Queen Marie Antoinette. Known throughout Europe for her elaborate fashion, she reportedly decorated her hairstyles with delicate potato flowers. The royal court quickly noticed. Nobles began copying the trend. Soon, the flower of the potato became fashionable among the French aristocracy. It was one of history's earliest examples of celebrity influence. Long before television, long before newspapers reached everyone, long before social media, people copied what admired figures wore. Parmentier understood something remarkable. Changing public opinion wasn't only about science, it was about culture, fashion, status, curiosity. The potato was slowly becoming respectable. But there was still one major problem. Most ordinary farmers still refused to grow it. The royal family could change fashion, but they couldn't instantly change generations of fear. Parmentier needed a completely different strategy, one that relied on human nature itself. Parmentier had spent years explaining why potatoes were valuable. Most people ignored him, so he decided to stop telling people. Instead, he would make them believe it themselves. Near Paris, Parmentier planted a large field of potatoes. Nothing unusual about that, but what happened next was extraordinary. During the day, armed guards surrounded the field. They watched every entrance. They patrolled the crops. They made it look as though the potatoes were incredibly valuable. People passing by couldn't help wondering, what are they protecting? Why would soldiers guard potatoes? Rumors spread quickly. Perhaps the king had discovered a rare new crop. Perhaps only nobles were allowed to eat it. Perhaps these potatoes were worth a fortune. The more mysterious the field became, the more curious people grew. Then, every evening, something unexpected happened. The guards quietly left. The field stood almost completely unprotected. Parmentier knew exactly what would happen. Under the cover of darkness, Villagers slipped into the fields. They stole potatoes. One sack, then another, then another. Parmentier never tried to stop them, because that had been his plan all along. He wanted the potatoes to disappear. The villagers took them home, planted them, cooked them, shared them with neighbors. They discovered the truth for themselves. The potatoes were delicious, nutritious, easy to grow, and incredibly productive. Parmentier hadn't changed their minds through arguments. He had changed them through curiosity. Modern psychologists call this the principle of scarcity. People often desire something more when they believe it's difficult to obtain. More than 200 years before modern advertising, Parmentier had mastered one of the most powerful marketing techniques ever used. He didn't sell potatoes. He made people steal them. And it worked brilliantly. Soon after, France faced one agricultural crisis after another. Poor harvests damaged wheat fields. Bread prices climbed higher. For millions of ordinary families, life became increasingly difficult. But this time, something had changed. Many farmers now had another crop: potatoes. Unlike wheat, potatoes produced far more food from the same amount of land. They survived difficult weather. They provided reliable harvests. Families that once refused to grow them now depended on them. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, the country faced enormous political and economic turmoil. The potato alone couldn't solve every problem, but it helped reduce hunger for countless families. Over the following decades, its popularity spread across every region of France. Farmers planted more, markets sold more, chefs created new recipes. The vegetable that had once been feared became part of everyday life. Today, France produces millions of tons of potatoes every year. From creamy gratins to buttery purees to crisp, golden fries, the potato is woven into French cuisine. It's difficult to imagine the country without it. Yet none of this seemed possible just a few generations earlier. One pharmacist, one idea, and one brilliant understanding of human behavior had helped transform an entire nation. History often celebrates kings, generals, and great battles. But sometimes, the people who change the world carry no sword at all. Antoine-Augustin Parmentier never conquered a kingdom. He never ruled France. He never discovered the potato. What he changed was something even more difficult: people's minds. He used science to challenge fear, patience to overcome tradition, and psychology to succeed where logic alone had failed. Today, every time someone in France enjoys a plate of crispy fries, a creamy potato gratin, or a comforting bowl of mashed potatoes, they're enjoying the legacy of a campaign that began more than 2 centuries ago. A campaign built not on force, but on curiosity. The potato didn't just feed France, it taught an important lesson. Sometimes, the greatest revolutions don't begin with weapons. They begin with ideas. And sometimes, one ordinary vegetable can change the course of history. Thank you for watching The History of. If you enjoyed this documentary, please like the video and subscribe. And tell us in the comments, which story should we uncover next? Because every ordinary thing has an extraordinary history.